This is Ben Borg.
This is Katrina Borg.
This is Claire Green.
This is Maggie Morgan. And this is the More Than Macros podcast.
This episode of the More Than Macros podcast is brought to you by Married to My Macros, performance nutrition coaching. Married to My Macros is a personalized one-on-one nutrition coaching service providing the highest level of support to clients with the practical tools and accountability needed to improve health, physical performance, and body composition through diet. While this podcast will fuel your mind, let the team at Married to My Macros fuel your body.
Welcome to, I guess this is part 5 of the IVF/pregnancy series with Kat. She has now made it to her halfway point in her pregnancy amidst a global pandemic nonetheless. I guess that's just the way the Borgs do things these days. Go big or go home, right?
Always.
So we're going to try and steer away from, all things COVID and whatnot. We feel like everyone probably needs a little bit of a break, distraction, and hopefully a little bit of entertainment. So thank you, Kat, for sitting down with us. I'm sure that things have been pretty crazy over there.
Hopefully not too much entertainment.
Well, just something different that anyone's listening to right now. So we're going to sit down and chat today just about, her experience thus far, provide listeners with some insight into, nutritional considerations for pregnancy, what the first little bit of the second trimester has looked like, what you're expecting to come, and hopefully some practical takeaways too for any of those listening who may be pregnant, thinking about getting pregnant, or those of us who might know someone who is pregnant. Thank you for sitting down with us. So you want to just tell us a little bit about what's been going on lately, kind of recap the first trimester and kind of what you're noticing that's different in the second trimester.
Well, first of all, when you say I've made it to my halfway point, it's kind of like when you're doing an awful AMRAP and the coach yells out, you're halfway there, and then it's like the most demotivating thing you've ever heard in your life. We are 21 weeks yesterday, I guess. So yeah, hopefully just over the halfway mark, hopefully not too much other than that. I think that as far as pregnancies go, I've probably had a relatively good and easy one. Certainly from a medical standpoint, it's been a breeze. From a personal standpoint, it has not. And I have clients and I have friends who have said that, they love being pregnant. It was super easy. And right up until the very final few weeks, it was no big deal. And I don't understand that at all. So even though I've had a really good pregnancy thus far, it's been very, very tough. And every day is like a new can of worms. And I think in all aspects, emotional, physical, mental, it's been challenging. So probably pretty relatable to most people, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
I would say
sorry. People actually have great pregnancies, or people maybe they're just spinning it?
I think some people genuinely do have really good pregnancies, and maybe they just have really good attitudes too. Or can appreciate, I think from a scientific standpoint, really appreciate what's going on in my body. I don't appreciate it personally. But then I don't know, my mother is one of these people that had the perfect pregnancy. Easy pregnancy, didn't pop till she was 8 months, never had a pregnancy symptom in the world, labored for 2 hours, no tearing, had the perfect baby, slept right away. I'm like, never talk to me about anything human making ever again. We couldn't be more different. I sent her a picture the other day. She was asking if I was bigger than last time we talked, and I just snapped a quick pic. And she's like, oh, God. She's like, I wasn't even that big when I was 8 months.
Not what I want to hear, Mom.
Thanks. I hadn't realized that today. So, yeah, I think people genuinely do experience things very differently. I think everybody's body is so different, and the level or the degree that you're in touch with what your normal cycles and symptoms and body functions are, I think can also play a big part in it. Because for me, it was just knowing what my normal is and knowing that I was so far off it. And certainly some of those things are physiological and directly related to the pregnancy, but then there was other elements that I knew were related to my diet or my activity being not its normal. And that was probably the harder part mentally for me, was that, hey, you're encountering these struggles and they're kind of your fault, right? And I would never, ever even, that would never cross my mind to think to say that to a client, that like, oh, if you ate better in your first trimester, you wouldn't gain so much weight. And, you know, like that, it's just not something you would ever, because the first trimester is, I think we've talked about this in the previous podcast, is just really about survival for a lot of people, right? It's just simply getting through it. I gained a lot of weight in my first trimester, particularly because of the IVF and the drugs and things like that. And then also like food aversions. I only wanted white food, macaroni, bread, potatoes, cauliflower, cheese. And certainly like, yeah, that did make it harder for me that I gained so much weight earlier on, because what I started experiencing early in the second trimester was a lot of quite painful stretching, not necessarily ligament pain, which generally comes a little bit later, but a lot of stretching. And it just felt like I could feel my muscle fibers bursting in my abdomen. And because of that, also a lot of issues with maintaining tension in lifts and squatting and things like that, and just really feeling like I was causing those fibers to break even more. And so I had to back off a lot of movements early on in CrossFit as well. And so because of that, and kind of knowing what my normal was, knowing what my baseline was, feeling all this increased stretching, having to modify because I'd already gained so much weight and I was feeling it even more, it just really compounded, I think, mentally for me. And I don't think that's, you know, crazy dissimilar from a lot of other people's experiences, but certainly I have clients who are, you know, at the same point in their pregnancy as I am, and they've put on a quarter of the weight that I have. So it would be logical to assume that they might not be experiencing some of these physical symptoms to the same degree, right?
And we've talked about this before too, the fact that you were coming off of a cut for nationals too. Do you think that that's played into it at all?
Mentally, yes. Physically, probably not so much. For me, a cut is, I usually walk around at about 65 kilos and I compete at 64. So it's more weight management than it is a drastic cut. I had to get a little underweight for nationals because it also coincided with my wedding. And I knew that, you know, in a big family that loves to cook, I was going to gain a little bit over the course of the wedding celebrations. So I was a bit artificially low going into the pregnancy. And I think mentally that was tough to deal with, in seeing both the weight gain on the scale and then also in going from being in a really lean state for quite a long time, you know, kind of feeling, I felt probably about the fittest I've ever felt immediately prior to my pregnancy. I was feeling really, really good, injury-free, metabolically fit, very strong. And to have that so rapidly decline and so profoundly decline has been really tough.
Yeah,
I think probably the most challenging.
Would you say that like differences between like the last time we sat down and talked about body image and that sort of thing, what has kind of changed since then in terms of how you're responding to that?
I wish I could say more. I'm still very much struggling with the body image aspect, and I was actually talking to another kind of higher level CrossFitter over Instagram recently about it, who has gone through a similar journey, and I didn't realize, but she'd actually put on a fair bit more weight than I had assumed, and so very much the same struggle. And she said it took her a long time to come to grips with it, and it's tough because you get it in your head and you know, I'm building an environment that I need to for this baby to healthfully grow. This is the priority. My aesthetics can take a back seat, because I know I can get it back on the other end. But I think there's also that pressure of being a higher level athlete, of being a nutritionist for me, and this idea that, oh, I should have been able to keep my weight gain in these exact parameters that are recommended. Well, the reality is for many of our athletes, you're probably going to need to exceed those weight gain recommendations just to get yourself into a more normal range, right? And so I'm still working on my head right now, trying to marry kind of like what I know in my head with what I feel. And that's an everyday ongoing struggle for sure.
And then I know Ben and myself, whenever I see your tummy too, we're like, oh my gosh, like it's so cute, like you look so good. And how is it kind of managing those kind of comments, I guess?
Oh, I don't mind those comments at all, but my natural response is, I hate it. And that, like, I hate that I'm saying something so negative about something that I especially should be very thankful for, given what we went through to get here. And I know it actually hurts Ben when I say it, because he genuinely believes it's beautiful and this amazing thing, and he hates that it's taking a bit of a toll on my psyche. But yeah, I would say the comments about it, I'm not one to get to, you never know what to say to pregnant women before you've actually gone there. Like, oh, you're so tiny, you're so cute, you're so big, what a huge, like, you never know what's going to be taken on. None of that really bothers me. I mean, I get the occasional ones like from my mom, and she's like, oh, geez, you're huge. I think as long as you're not comparing people, then people generally take it quite well. It's the same thing with, like, if friends or family come up and rub my belly, like, I could really care less. I don't want a stranger on the street doing it, but I don't care. Yeah, like, but I don't care if, like, my family members or aunts or uncles or friends, like, that doesn't bother me at all. But I know that certainly I've asked Ben on multiple occasions, like, do I look pregnant in this, or do I just look fat? Right. And he's just like, pregnant. You look pregnant. Like, sure, because if I just look fat, I'm going to change.
But we all know you're pregnant too, right? Like, I mean, that's a big thing also.
Yeah, it's still interesting how it plays on your psyche. And I think maybe in that transition between first and second trimester, when your body's really starting to change, but it's definitely not the kind of baby bump that people are going to be like, oh, congratulations, right? Like, it's still the baby bump that they're scared to say anything. Right. I think that's a really challenging point of time for a lot of women. Mm-hmm. And I think that, trying to feed yourself some positive rhetorical self-talk at that stage is really, really critical. To what degree it's effective, probably different for everyone, right?
I was going to ask you what sorts of things you have been doing to try and combat the mental struggles that you're dealing with.
So, I mean, I think probably the biggest thing is right now, my physical capacity, the movements I can do, everything is so limited. And so it has changed my focus to, and especially amidst the, COVID, and we're working out in our home gym and that's it. It's like, just get yourself into the gym every day to move. And I don't care if you get yourself down there and in 5 minutes you do some warm-up squats and you decide, I don't want to do this, and go back inside, because that never happens. You never do that.
Yeah.
But I think decreasing those expectations, and saying, okay, I'm going to do a 20-minute WOD and that's it. Or I don't have the energy to do a WOD today. I'm just going to do some strength work, and I'm just going to do some strict press, and really bringing my expectations of what I would consider to be a full day of training down, so that I'm able to get the movement in, because the movement will always make me feel a little bit better. Right. The other hand in that, though, is I've already had to kind of erase all of my PRs and all of my lifts and kind of what my typical working weights are, which is challenging, and just kind of go in every day and really do like RPE based training, because weird things that I wouldn't have expected to be affected, like my strict press, I'm doing my working sets like 20 pounds lighter than I ever would have before, and they're heavy. Right. And so it's just kind of trying to take away that, again, that self-comparison. Oh, well, I used to be, or I used to do this. And the reality is there's going to be a very long road of that ahead, right? Is just kind of going in, moving every day, doing something that you can find like capacity and pride in without comparing it to what you did before.
Yeah.
Probably being the biggest thing.
Similar to when you're injured too, coming back.
Yeah.
you're trying to, you know, work through an injury, which I guess you and Ben get to
We're
experience.
very well versed in this house. Yeah.
So that, yeah, I can understand that, and it is tough, but working with what you have, and you know, admiring what your body is still able to do, right, going through all of this.
I think that's the key, is like admiring what you're still able to do and not focusing on what you can't do, what you used to do, or what someone else is doing.
Right.
I mean, we all know women I've had clients who, like, the day before they gave birth were squatting double body weight, you know, or have watched women who were like 8 or 9 months pregnant competing in local CrossFit comps. And that's amazing. And the fact that they were able to do that, that's wonderful. That's not the case for me. And I just have to let that go and be okay with that, and not compare myself to like the woman across the street or this other woman, right? So just like I'm sure there's probably people comparing to me and saying, oh, well, I couldn't do that. And it's like, we just need to shut that down, because every experience is so different.
Yeah. Well, I know that we wouldn't talk about COVID, but at least you don't really have an opportunity to do any of that stuff right now either.
I know, but I'm feeling just the same as everyone else, where it's like it's really hard to get the motivation without having the gym and the community and stuff. So it's switching it to try and build habits instead of rely on external motivation. Same as anyone else, right?
Yeah, I think that's completely relevant right now. I know for me, my goal is just to get moving once a day. If I can either go for a long walk, go for a light jog, or do like 15 minutes of stretching, that's all I'm kind of expecting of myself right now, because it is it's difficult to get any more than that in some days.
I mean, I'm really fortunate in that I have Ben as well, who is super keen to do whatever. Like, he just really, really needs that sort of stimulus. And so at least I've got a partner, right? I feel for the people that are cooped up alone. Get on them Zoom calls.
Get
those workouts in.
So you mentioned the first trimester was all about survival. So what about the second trimester?
So I would say like the first, and you know, not for everyone, it's not like that. For some people, the first trimester is fine and it's kind of business as usual, which I know for a lot of women is concerning, because they're like, when am I going to feel pregnant? When am I going to feel sick? And is something wrong because I'm not? And it's like, no, that's just your body, and that's awesome. Run with it. Go with it. But for a lot of people, it is just about survival, and that's okay too. Like, eat your white food and just do you. Yeah. Second trimester is really, I say, like all about thrival. It's taking the opportunity when your symptoms are going to be, for most people, at their lowest. And I know I've just spent the last however many minutes complaining about how I felt throughout this, but they are like, you're going to be your most comfortable. And so it's taking that time again to build the habits and not rely on the external motivating factors. So for most women, your food aversions are going to go away, and you're going to be pretty keen to eat as you always have. What happens, I know what happened for me, is some pretty bad habits were developed in the first trimester when I was just trying to survive. And those habits kind of carried through into the second trimester. And I had to really consciously put a stop to them. Don't need a treat every day. You can have protein at every meal. You can have veggies at every meal. You can do all of these good things that you've always done. And start to really build off that, because as we look ahead to, you know, the first half of pregnancy is catabolic, and the second half is anabolic. Swap that around. Reverse. So in the first half, you're really building up all of your stores. In the second half, you're kind of eating into all of your stores. So if in the first trimester, you're not really able to kind of get the good stuff in there, then you want to try and build that in the second half and eat your nutrient-rich foods and top up all of those levels. Because as you get bigger in the third trimester, your capacity for food definitely does decrease for most people. They just can't eat the large meals. If you do experience heartburn, that's also going to contribute to, you know, having smaller more frequent meals. And so you want to maximize the time while you have it. You want to maximize the time when you're feeling well enough to exercise and you've still got enough mobility to do some stuff, right? There are definitely movements you can carry through all the way through your pregnancy, but even for me, it's like I can definitely still squat. I can definitely still do that comfortably, but every day that I go in, I can feel my belly in the bottom of the squats, like taking up more and more and more room. So I know that my timeline on being able to squat quickly or with a lot more weight are rapidly decreasing. So to me, it's like, okay, it's maximizing this time that you have while you have the energy, while you're still relatively small, and you can get all the food in to do all of those good things and set yourself up for a good run into the third try.
Right. And in terms, you touched on nutritional considerations. How does that change throughout a pregnancy from first trimester to second trimester to third trimester? Do your nutritional needs change, or are there certain things you'll always be focusing on?
Not massively. I mean, if you are like an MTMM client, you're set going into this because you're already eating the way that you need to eat for a healthy pregnancy and delivery and beyond. If you're not, then maybe an MTMM client, we can help you with that now. But you have a very minimal caloric increase to the tune of 150 to about 300 calories a day additional needed, just depending on your size and activity level. And obviously a little bit different if you're carrying multiples, but if you've got a singleton, it's a pretty modest calorie increase. So we're talking about, like maybe a little bit of extra, like slice of cheese and some apple. It really depends what else you're eating. Protein requirements, I still like to keep them nice and high for my pregnant women. Probably your capacity to break down protein is a little bit inhibited, so I wouldn't go maybe as high as I typically would pre-pregnancy, but still aiming for around that gram per pound, definitely. And what you want to use for your weight, I would say typically like your pre-pregnancy weight, and I kind of split that with any weight gain that you do have. So if you've put on 40 pounds during your pregnancy, you don't necessarily need to have an additional 40 grams of protein. In terms of carbohydrates, again, depending on what you were on before, you may definitely need more of them. I would say the absolute minimum for any pregnant woman, any size, any activity level, with very few exceptions, is going to be 175 grams a day, because your body becomes even more reliant on carbohydrates as an energy source, and there's only certain things that we can only use carbohydrates for certain things. So keto, intermittent fasting, things like that are definitely not nutritional strategies I would be recommending during pregnancy or breastfeeding for 99.9% of the population. I think maybe if you had an epileptic disorder, there's room for a little bit of interpretation there, but that should be medically monitored by a physician specializing in the field, not just yourself, right? So carbohydrate intake, minimum 175 grams. Definitely if you have a high carbohydrate intake previous, if you are very active, you can definitely be well and above and beyond that. And then we always say that just like with any individual, minimum of 20% of your daily intake should be coming from fat, quality fat sources, and a diverse array of fat sources just to support your hormonal profile. That doesn't change during pregnancy. So, but if your caloric needs are going up a little bit, then that also means your fat is going to need to go up a little bit with it.
Right. And in terms of supplementation or micronutrients that we should be paying attention to?
No, I mean, folate is obviously like the key thing that comes to mind there. Folate's really key first 12 weeks for sure, but I would say the first 4 to 7, I believe it's in between 4 and 7 weeks that the neural tube becomes completely formed. And if you haven't been taking folate by that point, you've missed the boat. So definitely if you're even remotely considering becoming pregnant or, behaving in a manner where you might become pregnant, that's probably something you want to be supplementing with anyways. And then aside from that, I would be focusing on getting all of your micronutrients through whole foods as much as possible for the synergistic benefits. I'm taking a prenatal vitamin right now, which most women do throughout their pregnancies. Some physicians will recommend that, you know, you don't necessarily need to after you're through your first trimester. Most of us will continue it. And if you're not going to continue it, then you probably want to be monitoring your iron levels, or at least letting your physician know that you're not taking one, so that they can monitor your levels a little bit more closely, because there is a small amount of iron in those multivites, and you need to increase your iron intake significantly as well, because you're going to have a dilution of that. So without the multivitamin, you may actually need to go on alternative supplements. Again, that's something I would not be supplementing iron definitely in pregnancy unless it was being monitored by blood work. If you have a deficiency, yes, absolutely. It's not something you want to be taking if you don't need to be, especially in the second trimester when constipation and things like that start to become an issue inherently anyways.
And then in terms of, getting your micronutrients from your diet, just looking for, the usual diverse colors and everything.
Yep. I'll eat all the veggies of the rainbow. If you're cutting out food groups, that's where I would say you definitely want to have a talk with a skilled practitioner, whether it be your GP, your physician, your midwife, your nutritionist, about do I need to be supplementing? Probably obviously the bigger diets that would come to mind would be either a vegan dietary approach or a ketogenic approach. I would say those are some massive nutrient deficits that you're going to encounter that is going to potentially have a huge impact on the developing fetus. So I would be talking to a professional if that was a dietary approach that I was looking to continue during pregnancy.
Right. I think I was thinking of a Friends episode where Phoebe was pregnant and she was a vegetarian and all she wanted was meat. I wonder if that's like a normal thing for pregnant women.
It's interesting because you hear so much about it going the other way, right? And women becoming so meat averse early in their pregnancies. Big part of the reason for that is obviously like contamination, right? And the risk for salmonella or other organisms to be present in that. And the body's kind of got this innate response to it. Usually that dies off after the first trimester, but if we're talking about meat, if we're talking about B vitamins, all these things that we get from our meat sources, it doesn't surprise me at all that even if that had never been a food that appealed to you before, that you might actually want it. The vegetarian approach to dietary approach during pregnancy is definitely a lot easier to manage than a vegan approach, because particularly dependent on if you're doing dairy, eggs, fish, things like that, you can definitely still hit complete proteins, and you can definitely hit almost all of your micronutrient groups. But when you're cutting out those things, it becomes incredibly difficult.
And so what are you expecting moving forward? Do you have any expectations of what the third trimester is going to bring?
If there's anything I've learned so far, it's like no expectations.
Don't have any.
I think that I had this expectation of the second trimester that it was all going to be sunshine and unicorns, and I was going to have my energy back, and I wasn't going to be nauseated, and I was going to feel great. And while I do have my energy back, I'm still napping a lot. I'm not nauseated anymore, so that's phenomenal. But like I said, I've experienced so many other strange symptoms, like the constipation type issues are definitely starting for me, which has never been a problem before. A lot of the pain and the pulling and things like that are there. So it's like, it really wasn't this magical period that I was expecting it. So I'm going into the third trimester with no personal expectations. That being said, having worked with so many women who have recently given birth or gone through it, I'm very cognizant of decreasing appetite or ability to eat, and heartburn, which I'm also already experiencing at 21 weeks. I'd say it's been about the last 2 weeks that it started to creep up, and it's not bad. But I'm definitely like cognizant of not eating close to bedtime and things like that now.
Right.
So those would probably be the two biggest things that I would expect to change for most people. But I mean, I guess we'll just kind of have to ride it out and see.
With the decreased appetite, is it like, how important is it to just kind of force the food in and make sure that you're hitting a minimum caloric intake?
Not obviously it is. Obviously we need people to eat, but I do think that the lower appetite is generally more of a space restriction issue, and as opposed to true appetite suppression. And so your body's still going to give you those hunger cues throughout the day, and it may just mean that you're changing your pattern of eating. I would say it's way more important to listen to your body than it is to have this set macro profile that you have to hit. Because I think when you start force feeding that a lot, you definitely compound issues like the constipation, like the reflux. Nausea and vomiting can become an issue again in the third trimester, again, more space related than anything. So I mean, you're doing yourself a massive disservice if you're force feeding all of this food just to have it come up again on you, or to be awake all night not getting any quality sleep because you've got heartburn. So I definitely think more important to listen to the body. With my clients who've been in their third trimester and we've had to do that, we've definitely brought their profiles down, and we've really focused on spreading out their meals and kind of looking at an ideal macronutrient composition of those meals, but not getting too hung up on it if it doesn't go well, right? Easy to digest foods as well. So like if you tolerate yogurt, really quite okay, that's probably a really good one. Any sort of soups, things like that, the high water content of those and just the fact that they're already kind of pre-digested and broken down means they're going to move through your system a lot quicker. So those are a lot of my go-tos for sure, as opposed to like the massive pile of veggies and steak and potato, right?
Yeah, maybe more calorically dense foods too, like some cookies.
Exactly. Little breakfast cookies, maybe a little bit of cheeky icing on the top if you're feeling really naughty.
To make those this weekend.
So good.
Well, thank you for sharing all that with us, and I just want to tell you to like buckle up and get ready for the third trimester.
I'm sure there's all of the, there's going to be a bunch of women that listen to this that are like 36 weeks and they're like, just you wait.
Well, if you have any tips, feel free to comment or reach out to Kat and let her know what she's in for. But
yes, absolutely. And it's good too, because for me, it's like like I said, my experience is very different than everyone else's. And the more feedback we get from the more people, we're going to be able to help different individuals in different situations, right? So the more the merrier, definitely.
Yeah, and we'll sit down again in a few weeks, hopefully, if things start to settle down and it's easier to catch up, to see how things are going.
Beautiful. Sounds good.
If you have any specific questions for Kat, pregnancy related or other, just let us know and we'll be sure to touch on them next time.
All right. Take care.
Take care.